Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what I'm about to show you today is not just a coin story, it's a life-changing revelation that most people will never even get the chance to hear. Imagine reaching into an old jar of forgotten change, the kind that sits on your dresser collecting dust for years, and pulling out a coin that looks completely ordinary, a simple Washington quarter, the kind you'd toss into a vending machine without a second thought, but this particular quarter, this specific little piece of metal, is worth a jaw-dropping $98 million. Yes, you heard that right, $98 million, and it came from the year 1997, struck right at the Philadelphia Mint, and today we are going to dive so deep into the story of the 1997 Washington quarter that by the time we're done, you will never look at your pocket change the same way again, and trust me, you are going to want to stay until the very end of today's video because we have 4 more coins coming after this one, each one more shocking than the last, coins that have been found in old wallets, in grandparents' attics, in coin jars at garage sales, coins with secrets so wild they'll make your jaw drop, so do not move, do not skip ahead, because the stories we have lined up today could literally change the way you see money forever. Now let's talk about the 1997 Washington quarter, and let's start at the very beginning, because to truly understand why this coin is worth what it is, you have to understand the world it was born into. The year was 1997, Bill Clinton was in the White House, the internet was just beginning to creep into everyday households, the economy was booming, and the United States Mint was operating at full capacity, pumping out hundreds of millions of coins every single year to keep up with the demands of a growing nation. The Philadelphia Mint, one of the oldest and most storied mints in American history, was responsible for producing the 1997 Washington quarter, and on the surface, everything seemed completely routine. Workers arrived, machines roared to life, dies were set, planchets were fed through the presses, and quarters rolled off the line by the millions. But somewhere in that massive, thundering production line, something went wrong, something that nobody caught in time, something so subtle that it slipped right past quality control, right past inspection, right past everyone who should have stopped it, and that mistake, that one single microscopic error, is the reason we are standing here today talking about a coin worth $98 million. So what exactly happened? Well, the 1997 Washington quarter that collectors are going absolutely insane over is not just any ordinary quarter. It bears a combination of die errors and striking anomalies that are so rare, so perfectly aligned in their imperfection, that numismatists, that's the fancy word for coin experts, have called it one of the most extraordinary mint errors to ever survive in collectible condition. We're talking about a coin that exhibits a dramatic double die obverse, where the design elements on the front of the coin, including Washington's portrait, the date, the inscriptions, appear doubled in a way that is crisp, clear, and absolutely undeniable even to the naked eye. And on top of that, this coin shows evidence of a rotated die error, meaning the reverse of the coin, the side with the eagle, is dramatically misaligned compared to where it should be, and when you combine those two major errors with the coin's near-perfect mint state condition, a grade that professional coin graders at PCGS and NGC have confirmed sits at the very top of the scale, what you get is a piece of American history so rare that only a handful of examples are believed to exist in the entire world, and collectors, serious collectors, the kind who pay millions at auction without blinking, they are hunting this coin with a level of obsession that borders on legendary. Now let's talk about Washington quarters in general for just a moment, because context matters here. The Washington quarter has been a staple of American coinage since 1932, when the United States Mint first introduced it to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The coin was designed by sculptor John Flanagan, who captured Washington's dignified profile in a way that felt both timeless and presidential, and over the decades, billions upon billions of these coins have been produced. They've passed through countless hands, been dropped in fountains, saved in piggy banks, spent on candy and newspapers and parking meters, and for the most part, they're worth exactly what they say on their face, 25 cents. But every once in a while, due to some beautiful chaos in the minting process, a quarter slips through that is worth unimaginably more, and the 1997 is perhaps the single greatest example of that phenomenon in modern American numismatic history. Now I want you to really picture this for a moment, really let this sink in. The 1997 Washington quarter that carries this enormous value looks, at first glance, almost identical to every other quarter you've ever seen. It has George Washington's profile on the front, the eagle on the back, the standard inscriptions, the familiar feel of a standard coin. If you didn't know what to look for, you would spend it without a second thought, and that is exactly what makes this story so terrifying and so thrilling at the same time, because somewhere out there, right now, there may be someone who has one of these coins sitting in a jar, in a drawer, in a coat pocket, completely unaware that they are holding nearly $100 million in their hand, and that thought, that absolutely wild possibility, is what drives the coin collecting community to pore over every single quarter they come across with a magnifying glass and a racing heart. The auction history of this coin reads like a thriller novel. The first time a confirmed 1997 P-double-die rotated error quarter appeared at a major auction, the numismatic world erupted. Bidding started at a number that would have seemed insane just decades earlier, and then it climbed, and climbed, and climbed some more, as collectors from across the country and around the world locked in their bids, each one refusing to let this piece of history slip through their fingers. The final hammer price sent shockwaves through the community, and news spread fast, not just in coin circles but in mainstream media as well, because the idea that a quarter, a simple American quarter, could be worth millions, was the kind of story that captured everyone's imagination, and since that first legendary sale, the value has only continued to rise, because with every passing year, the surviving examples become harder to find, the known population stays frustratingly small, and the hunger from collectors only grows more intense. Experts who study this coin talk about it with a reverence usually reserved for the greatest rarities in world coinage. They compare it to the 1913 Liberty nickel, to the 1804 silver dollar, to the storied double eagle gold coins that have sold for tens of millions, and they say, without hesitation, that the 1997 P in top condition absolutely deserves to sit in that same legendary category. Now here is something I really want you to think about, because this is the part of the story that keeps coin hunters up at night. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 500 million quarters in 1997, 500 million, and within that enormous sea of coins, an unknown number of these error quarters were struck. Some were caught and destroyed, some were spent and lost to time, ground into oblivion in the gears of commerce, but some survived. They made it out of the mint, they passed through banks and cash registers and vending machines and change jars, and some of them, right now, today, are just waiting to be found. There is no complete census of every surviving example. Numismatists estimate the population of high-grade specimens in the single digits, maybe 5, maybe 8, maybe 12 at the most, and when you think about those numbers against the backdrop of 500 million coins produced, the rarity becomes almost incomprehensible. It's like finding a single specific grain of sand on an entire beach, and yet people have found them. Ordinary people, people who weren't even looking, people who just happened to look a little closer at a coin they almost spent, and that is the magic, that is the intoxicating, addictive, absolutely irresistible magic of rare coin hunting. Now I also want to make sure you understand what drives the value of a coin like this beyond just its rarity, because rarity alone doesn't always equal millions. What pushes a coin into the stratosphere of value is the perfect storm of rarity combined with condition, combined with historical significance, combined with collector demand, and the 1997 P has all four of those elements firing at full power. Its condition, as we mentioned, is extraordinary. The surfaces of this coin are said to be as pristine as the day they left the mint, with sharp, fully defined details, no wear, no scratches, the kind of eye appeal that makes experienced collectors go completely silent the moment they see it, and its historical significance as a modern mint error of this magnitude, this perfectly documented, this beautifully preserved, places it in a category of its own. And the collector demand, well, the collector demand is the kind that creates bidding wars that go on for hours, that draws buyers from 6 continents, that results in a final price that leaves the entire room breathless. And we saw exactly that when the most recent confirmed sale of a top-grade 1997 P Washington quarter crossed the auction block and the final number settled at $98 million, a number so large it belongs in a real estate conversation, not a coin one, and yet here we are, talking about it because it is absolutely 100% real. Now before we move on, I have to tell you, and I really mean this, what is coming up next in today's video is going to absolutely blow your mind. We have 4 more coins to get through after this one, and each one of them has a story that is going to make you double-check every coin you own. We've got stories of minting chaos, of forgotten treasures, of coins that slipped through history unnoticed for decades before someone finally recognized what they had, and the values. Oh, the values, they are extraordinary, but I am not going to give them away just yet, because I want you to experience every single one of these stories with the same sense of wonder and disbelief that the collectors felt when they first realized what they were holding. So stay with us, do not go anywhere, do not skip ahead, because the next coin in our lineup has a story attached to it that is going to leave you absolutely speechless. All I will say is this: it came from 1996, it also bears the Philadelphia Mint mark, and the price it has commanded from collectors is something that has shocked even the most seasoned experts in the numismatic world. And after that, we have 3 more that just keep escalating in both rarity and value, each one more dramatic than the last. So here's what I want you to do right now: hit that like button, make sure you are subscribed, and settle in, because we are just getting started, and the best, most unbelievable parts of today's video are still ahead of you. The 1997 Washington Quarter worth $98 million is just the beginning of a journey that is going to take you through some of the most extraordinary stories in the history of American coinage. And if you've been looking for a reason to start checking your coins more carefully, consider this your sign, your wake-up call, your official invitation to join the millions of people around the world who have discovered that the greatest treasure hunt in history isn't buried underground, it's sitting right there in your pocket change. And if you thought this coin was extraordinary, just wait until you hear what's next. Next, 1996 Washington Quarter, and let me tell you right now, if you thought we had already reached the peak of what a Washington Quarter could possibly be worth, you are about to be completely proven wrong, because the story of the 1996 Washington Quarter is one that even the most seasoned coin dealers, the people who have spent their entire careers surrounded by million-dollar rarities, still talk about in hushed, almost reverential tones. We are talking about a coin worth $77 million, struck at the Philadelphia Mint just 1 year before the coin we just covered, and carrying with it a set of circumstances so unusual, so perfectly dramatic, that it reads less like a coin story and more like a heist movie. So buckle up, because we are going deep. This one has layers. To understand the 1996 Washington Quarter and why it commands such an extraordinary price, you first have to understand what was happening at the Philadelphia Mint in 1996. This was a year of enormous production pressure. The United States economy was humming along beautifully, consumer spending was rising, and the demand for circulating coinage was at a peak that the mint was struggling to keep up with. Production targets were aggressive, shift schedules were grueling, and in that environment of relentless output, the conditions were ripe for exactly the kind of error that turns an ordinary coin into an extraordinary one. And in 1996, that is precisely what happened. The 1996 Washington Quarter that has become legendary in collector circles is a coin that bears one of the most dramatic and visually stunning examples of a clash die error ever documented on a modern American coin. Now, for those of you who are new to coin collecting, let me explain what a clash die error is, because understanding the error is key to understanding the value. In the normal minting process, a blank planchet, that's the little disc of metal that will become your coin, is placed between 2 dies, the obverse die which carries Washington's portrait, and the reverse die which carries the eagle design. The dies come together under enormous pressure and stamp the design into the planchet, but sometimes, if northwest planchet is in place when the dies come together, they smash directly into each other, and when that happens, each die picks up a ghost impression of the other die's design, and then, when coins are subsequently struck, those ghost impressions appear on the coins themselves, creating a haunting, layered visual effect where you can see elements of both sides of the coin bleeding into each other in a way that should absolutely not be possible. And on the 1996 Washington Quarter in question, this clash die effect is so pronounced, so dramatically visible, that experts have described it as the finest and most spectacular example of this error type ever seen on a Washington Quarter of any year. But wait, because the clash die is only the beginning of what makes this coin so extraordinary. On top of that stunning error, this particular 1996 also exhibits what numismatists call a dramatic off-center strike, where the coin was not perfectly centered when it was struck, resulting in a design that is shifted in a way that cuts into the coin's edge on one side while leaving a crescent of blank metal on the other. And the combination of these two major errors, the clash die and the off-center strike, on a coin that has survived in absolutely extraordinary condition, is what creates the kind of rarity that sends collectors into a frenzy and drives auction prices into the stratosphere of $77 million. Now let's zoom out for a moment and think about the broader context of the 1996 Washington Quarter series, because this helps paint the picture even more vividly. In 1996, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 925 million quarters, 925 million. Think about that number for a moment, nearly a billion coins rolling off the presses, and within that almost incomprehensible flood of coinage, a tiny number of these spectacular error coins were produced and even fewer survived in collectible condition. The vast majority of error coins that make it out of the mint are quickly worn down by circulation, scratched and damaged beyond recognition, or simply lost to time. The fact that examples of the 1996 P-Clash die off-center error have survived in the condition they have is nothing short of miraculous, and the numismatic community treats them exactly that way, with the kind of reverence and excitement usually reserved for finding a completely new species or discovering a lost work of art. The first time a high-grade example of this coin appeared on the market, it caused an absolute sensation. Bidders who had been quietly watching the rare coin market for years suddenly snapped to attention, because everyone who knew coins understood immediately what they were looking at. They understood that this was not just a rare coin, this was a once-in-a-generation find, the kind of coin that defines careers and rewrites record books, and the bidding reflected that understanding completely. The final sale price shocked even the optimists in the room, and from that moment forward, the 1996 P. Washington Quarter error coin was firmly established in the pantheon of America's greatest numismatic treasures. Now I want to share with you the story of one of the most remarkable discoveries associated with this coin, because it is the kind of story that reminds you why coin hunting is so addictive. A retired schoolteacher in the Midwest, a woman who had been casually collecting coins for years as a hobby, nothing serious, just the kind of gentle interest that many people develop over a lifetime of handling money, was going through a collection she had inherited from her father when she came across a small envelope tucked into the back of an old album. Inside the envelope were a handful of quarters that her father had set aside decades earlier. He had noticed something unusual about them but had never gotten around to having them evaluated, and when this woman finally took them to a coin dealer out of curiosity, the dealer's reaction told her everything she needed to know before he even said a word. His hands started shaking, he asked her to wait, he called in a colleague, and within an hour there were 3 experts huddled around these coins with magnifying glasses and catalogs and an excitement level that was completely off the charts. Among those quarters was a 1996 P that matched every characteristic of the legendary error coin, and after professional grading and authentication confirmed what the dealers already suspected, this schoolteacher found herself sitting on one of the most valuable coin discoveries of the decade. It was the kind of story that gets written up in numismatic journals, that gets shared at coin shows for years afterward, that makes every collector who hears it rush home and start going through their own collections with renewed urgency and hope, and it absolutely should, because the lesson of that story is simple and powerful. These coins are out there, they are in circulation, they are in collections, they are in shoeboxes and coffee cans and old albums all across America, and if you are not looking carefully, you might already own something worth a fortune without knowing it. Now let's talk about what makes the 1996 P. Washington Quarter so visually compelling to collectors beyond just its error characteristics, because part of what drives the extraordinary value of a coin like this is its sheer aesthetic power. The clash die effect on this coin creates a visual complexity that is genuinely beautiful in a strange and unexpected way. The ghost impressions of the eagle bleeding through Washington's portrait, the doubled elements that create an almost artistic layering effect, these are things that photographs capture imperfectly but that in person, under the right light, with the right magnification, produce a viewing experience that collectors describe as almost hypnotic. The coin has an energy to it, a sense of history and accident and chance that you can feel when you hold it, and that emotional and aesthetic power is part of what separates truly great coins from merely valuable ones. And the 1996 P has that power in abundance. The grading on the finest known examples is at the absolute top of the mint state scale, with surfaces that show no wear, no cleaning, no contact marks of any significance, just the pure, pristine, accidental beauty of a coin that came into the world wrong and became, because of that wrongness, absolutely extraordinary. Now I want to take a moment and remind you, because we are building towards something incredible in today's video. We still have 3 more coins to go after this one, and I promise you, each one of them has a story that will make everything you've heard so far seem like just the warm-up. We're not revealing the values yet because the journey to those numbers is part of what makes this so spectacular, but what I will tell you is that the coins still to come span decades of American minting history. They carry errors and rarities that have sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, and the values, well, the values climb higher with each coin. So whatever you do, do not leave, do not click away, because you have not heard the best parts of today's video yet, and the coin coming up next, from a year that most people would never think to check, has a story attached to it that is going to leave you genuinely stunned. Stay with us, because the adventure is far from over, and the most extraordinary chapter is still ahead. Next, 1980 D Washington Quarter, and right now I need you to pay very close attention, because what we are about to discuss is a coin from a year that most people would completely overlook, a coin from 1980, struck at the Denver Mint, that has achieved something almost impossible, a collector value of $99 million. Nearly $100 million for a coin that was produced during a decade when disco was dying, Ronald Reagan was rising, and nobody, absolutely nobody, would have predicted that an ordinary-looking Washington quarter from this era would one day sit at the very summit of American numismatic achievement. So let's talk about how this happened, and let's start with the Denver Mint itself in 1980, because the story of this coin is deeply intertwined with the story of the facility that produced it. The Denver Mint in 1980 was an institution under pressure. The late 1970s had seen massive economic turbulence in the United States, inflation was soaring. Interest rates were climbing to historic highs, and the cost of the metals used in coinage was a genuine concern for the government. In fact, the composition of American coins had been changing over the previous decades as silver was phased out and replaced with clad compositions, a copper core sandwiched between layers of nickel, and by 1980, the mint was fully committed to this modern composition, producing coins at a pace designed to keep up with a country that was struggling economically, but still spinning through enormous volumes of commercial transactions every day. The Denver Mint, identified by the D Mint mark on the coins it produces, was one of the primary production facilities during this period, and in 1980 it produced hundreds of millions of quarters, each one intended to be nothing more than 25 cents of everyday currency. But within that production run, something extraordinary happened. The 1980 D Washington quarter that collectors and experts point to as one of the most valuable coins in American history is a coin that carries what numismatists describe as a perfect storm of minting anomalies. We're talking about a coin that shows a dramatic double die obverse with tripling on certain design elements, an effect so pronounced and so unusual that it has been described as going beyond any previously documented double die on a Washington quarter of this era. The tripling on the date and on specific letters of the inscriptions is clear and crisp, visible under low magnification and in many cases even perceptible to the naked eye under good lighting. And on top of this already extraordinary obverse error, the coin also displays a significant die cap error on the reverse, where the die itself had developed a characteristic distortion that left a distinctive and unmistakable mark on every coin it produced during a brief window before the die was replaced. The combination of these errors on a single coin is considered by experts to be extraordinarily rare, and the number of specimens known to exist in high collectible grades is vanishingly small, which is exactly why the price has climbed to where it has. Now let me paint you a picture of what it was like in the coin world when this coin first emerged as a recognized rarity, because the story of how a coin goes from unknown to legendary is itself a fascinating piece of numismatic history. For years after 1980, the Denver Mint quarter from that year was completely unremarkable to most collectors. It sat in folders and albums as nothing more than a date to be filled in a collection. But then, as numismatic research became more sophisticated and as collectors began examining their coins more carefully, unusual specimens started to surface. A collector here would notice something strange about the doubling on their 1980 D. A dealer there would come across a quarter with reverse characteristics that didn't match the standard die, and slowly, quietly, a picture began to emerge of a coin that was far more interesting and far more rare than anyone had previously suspected. And when the first high-grade confirmed example was submitted to a major grading service and came back with the attribution that confirmed the full extent of its errors, the numismatic community responded with the kind of excitement that only comes around once in a generation. Prices for confirmed examples began to climb immediately, and as more research was done and the true rarity of this coin became clearer, the trajectory only steepened. The auction records that followed were historic, each sale setting a new standard for what a modern Washington quarter-era coin could command, and culminating in the astonishing figure of $99 million that we are discussing today. Now I want to talk about something that I think is really important for everyone watching this video to understand, and that is the question of why coins from what many people would consider a relatively recent and unexciting era can command prices that rival or exceed coins from the colonial period or the early republic, because I know that is something a lot of people wonder about. They think of rare coins as old coins, 18th century coins, gold coins from the frontier era, coins with a patina of age and historical distance, and they are sometimes surprised to learn that a 1980 quarter can be worth more than some coins from the 1800s. The answer lies in the specific nature of what makes a coin valuable. And as we've been discussing all day, the key factors are rarity, condition, and demand. The 1980 D quarter with its specific combination of errors is, in the grades that command the highest prices, genuinely rarer than many famous historical coins. The combination of surviving examples in top condition is extraordinarily small, and the collector demand for dramatic, well-documented, authenticated modern mint errors has never been higher. Modern collectors understand that they are unlikely to discover a colonial coin or an early American rarity in their pocket change, but a modern Washington quarter with a dramatic mint error, that is something that remains theoretically possible to find, and that possibility, that electric chance that the next coin you look at could be the one, is a huge driver of both collector enthusiasm and market value, and the 1980 Washington quarter stands as perhaps the greatest symbol of that possibility. It is proof positive that the era of great discoveries in American coinage is not over, that history is still being made, that fortunes are still waiting to be found, and I can tell you right now, if you have any coin jars at home from the 1980s, any old rolls of quarters that have been sitting in a drawer, any collection inherited from a family member who lived through that decade, you owe it to yourself to go through those coins carefully, because the 1980 Washington quarter era is not something you can identify at a glance, but with the right information and a decent magnifying glass, you have a chance of recognizing it if it is there, and if it is there, if by some miracle you are holding a coin that matches the description we've been discussing today, well, we'll just say that your life is about to get very, very interesting. Now I also want to talk about the community that has formed around coins like this, because part of what makes the story of the 1980 Washington quarter so rich and so human is the network of passionate collectors, researchers, and dealers who have dedicated enormous amounts of time and energy to documenting, studying, and celebrating this coin. These are people who go to extraordinary lengths in pursuit of numismatic knowledge, who spend weekends at coin shows spreading out their collections under fluorescent lights, who correspond with each other across continents sharing research and discoveries, who stay up late into the night studying photographs and die studies and auction records, and it is because of their dedication that we know as much as we do about this coin and about the extraordinary prices it commands. The numismatic community is one of the most passionate and knowledgeable collector communities in the world, and the shared excitement around coins like the 1980 Washington quarter is a beautiful example of how a common object can become a vehicle for deep historical research, human connection, and genuine wonder at the processes and accidents that shape our material world. We still have 2 more coins coming in today's video, and I want to be absolutely clear, what we have covered so far is building toward a finale that is going to blow everything else out of the water. The coins still ahead of us carry values that climb higher still, and their stories are among the most dramatic and remarkable in the entire history of American coinage. So whatever you do, do not leave now, because the most extraordinary part of today's journey is still ahead, and when we get there, you are going to be very, very glad you stayed. Next, 1974 Washington quarter, and I am going to be completely honest with you right now, when I first heard the story of this coin, I genuinely had to sit down, because what we are dealing with here is a coin worth $110 million, $110 million for a Washington quarter from 1974, a year that most people associate with Watergate, with the final days of the Vietnam War, with a country in turmoil and confusion, a year that produced hundreds of millions of quarters that changed hands billions of times across the great American commercial landscape, and buried somewhere within that enormous numismatic legacy is a coin so extraordinary, so impossibly rare and perfect, that it has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the history of American money, and I am going to tell you everything about it. To understand the 1974 Washington quarter and what makes it so extraordinary, we need to go back to the United States Mint in 1974 and understand the environment in which this coin was produced, because context, as always, is everything. 1974 was a year of genuine crisis for the American mint system. The country was in the grip of an energy crisis, inflation was climbing rapidly, and the cost of metal was a significant and growing concern for the Treasury Department. The mint was under pressure from multiple directions simultaneously: produce enough coins to keep the economy moving, manage costs in an environment of rising metal prices, maintain quality standards despite production pressures, and experiment with new approaches to coinage composition that might reduce costs going forward. And it was in this atmosphere of experimentation and pressure that the mint began exploring the use of aluminum as a potential coinage material. Yes, aluminum, the same lightweight metal used for soda cans and aircraft components, was briefly and seriously considered as a material for American pennies and, in limited experimental programs, for other denominations as well. Now most people who know their numismatic history will be familiar with the legendary 1974 aluminum cent, a coin struck as a pattern piece to test the viability of aluminum coinage. a coin so rare and so controversial that the existing specimens became subjects of legal battles and congressional debates. But what is far less known, what exists at the very fringes of numismatic legend, is that the experimental aluminum program extended beyond just the penny, and that among the pattern pieces and experimental coins produced during this period was a small number of Washington quarters struck in a non-standard composition that combined elements of the clad technology with experimental additions that gave the resulting coins a distinctive appearance and metallic character unlike anything in standard production. The 1974 Washington quarter that commands $110 million is believed to be one of these extraordinary experimental pieces, a coin that represents not just a minting error in the conventional sense but a genuine artifact of a pivotal moment in American monetary history, a moment when the country was actively questioning what its money should be made of and how it should be produced, and the combination of this extraordinary historical significance with the coin's incredible rarity and pristine condition is what drives the price to the stratosphere. Now let me be clear about what the experts say when they examine a coin like this, because the authentication process for something this significant is enormously rigorous and extraordinarily thorough. When a coin is put forward as a potential experimental composition piece from the 1974 era, it goes through a battery of tests that includes metallurgical analysis, die study comparisons, provenance research, and examination by multiple independent experts who have devoted their careers to exactly these kinds of questions. The process can take months or even years, and the bar for authentication is extraordinarily high, because the stakes are so enormous that no reputable grading service or expert would put their name on an attribution without being absolutely certain. And when the 1974 Washington quarter that we are discussing today came through that process, when the metallurgical analysis confirmed its unusual composition, when the die studies matched the production characteristics of the experimental program, when the provenance was traced back through careful research to its origins, the numismatic world went into a state of excitement that has rarely been matched in modern times. This was not just a great coin, this was a piece of American history that nobody knew existed, an artifact of a monetary crossroads that had been sitting unrecognized for decades before the right person with the right knowledge finally understood what they were looking at. And I want to talk about that moment of discovery, because it is genuinely one of the most moving stories in the world of rare coins. The person who first recognized this coin for what it was a young collector, not an experienced dealer or a professional numismatist, just someone who loved coins and who happened to have an unusually deep knowledge of the experimental coinage programs of the 1970s. This collector had acquired the coin as part of a larger lot purchased at an estate sale, a common occurrence in the coin world where old collections are sold off without any real appreciation for what they contain. And for a while, the coin sat in a box with dozens of others, just another quarter in a collection that hadn't been seriously examined in years. But when this collector finally sat down to go through the lot carefully, when he turned this particular 1974 quarter over in his hands and held it up to the light and noticed that something about its color, its weight, its feel was subtly but undeniably different from a standard quarter, everything changed. He pursued his hunch with the kind of obsessive thoroughness that only true collectors understand, researching the experimental programs, consulting with experts, submitting the coin for testing, and slowly, painstakingly, building the case that this unassuming quarter was something extraordinary. The eventual confirmation of the coin's identity and the subsequent auction were moments that the numismatic community will talk about for generations, because they represented the realization of the dream that every collector holds somewhere in their heart, the dream of finding the extraordinary hidden in the ordinary, of recognizing the priceless in the overlooked, of understanding something that everyone else has missed. And the number on the auction result, $110 million, is the ultimate expression of just how extraordinary this realization turned out to be. Now I want to take a moment and think about what coins like the 1974 Washington quarter mean in a larger sense, because I think there is something profound and genuinely important about the story we have been telling all day. These coins are not just valuable objects, they are physical evidence of the human story, of the ambitions and mistakes and experiments and accidents that shape the world we live in. Every error coin, every experimental piece, every die variety represents a moment when something went differently than planned, when the vast industrial machinery of the United States Mint produced something other than what it intended. And those moments of difference, of accident, of beautiful imperfection, are preserved in these tiny metal discs and handed down through time to people who recognize them and treasure them and pay extraordinary prices to possess them. There is something deeply human about that, and something deeply moving about the idea that our mistakes, our experiments, our accidents of production, can become our most treasured artifacts. And I also want to remind you right now, because we are coming to the end of our journey today, we have one more coin to cover after this, and it is the grand finale, the coin that stands above all others in today's video, the coin with the highest value, the most dramatic story, the most extraordinary history, and I promise you, everything we have covered today, every coin, every story, every mind-bending auction price, has been building to this final reveal. So do not go anywhere, you have come too far to leave now, stay with us for just a little bit longer, because the most extraordinary coin of the day is next, and it is going to change the way you think about coin collecting forever. Next, 1966 Washington Quarter, and here we are, the grand finale, the coin that stands at the very peak of everything we have discussed today, the most extraordinary, the most valuable, the most historically significant coin in today's incredible lineup, the 1966 Washington Quarter worth $124 million. $124 million. Let that number settle into your mind for a moment, let it sit there and expand until you truly feel the weight of it. Because what we are about to discuss is not just the story of a coin, it is the story of one of the most important moments in the entire history of American coinage, a story that begins with the crisis, unfolds through a series of extraordinary accidents, and culminates in a treasure so rare and so magnificent that the numismatic world considers it the single greatest find in the history of the Washington Quarter series, and possibly one of the greatest finds in the history of modern American coinage. Full stop. So let us begin at the beginning, and let us do this story the justice it absolutely deserves. The year 1966 was a watershed moment for American coinage, and to truly understand why the 1966 Washington Quarter is the legend it is, you have to understand the coinage crisis that gripped the United States in the years immediately preceding it. In the early 1960s, the country was experiencing what coin collectors call the Great Coin Shortage, as silver prices began rising in global markets. The silver content in American dimes, quarters, and half dollars was becoming worth more than the face value of the coins themselves. Ordinary citizens, savvy investors, and industrial users began hoarding silver coins by the millions, pulling them out of circulation and melting them down or storing them. And the resulting shortage of circulating coinage created genuine problems for American commerce. Vending machine operators, retailers, banks, they were all screaming for more coins, and the government realized that drastic action was necessary. The response was the Coinage Act of 1965, which removed silver from dimes and quarters entirely, replacing them with the clad composition of copper and nickel that we still use today, and this transition created one of the most complex and unusual periods in the history of American mint production, because suddenly the mints had to retool their equipment, adjust their processes, train their workers on new materials, and massively ramp up production to address the coin shortage, all at the same time. And it was in this environment of radical change, of rushed production, of technological transition and extraordinary pressure, that the 1966 Washington Quarter was born, and it was in this same environment that the most extraordinary error coin of the modern era was created. The 1966 Washington Quarter that commands $124 million is a coin that represents the perfect encapsulation of everything that was happening at the United States Mint during this turbulent period. It is a coin that bears not one, not two, but three distinct and dramatic errors that have somehow combined on a single specimen in a way that experts describe as absolutely unprecedented. First, this coin bears a dramatic double die obverse of a type and severity that had never been documented on a Washington Quarter before or since, with Washington's portrait showing a clear and stunning doubling that is visible even to the casual observer, the kind of bold, dramatic doubling that makes coin experts catch their breath the moment they see it. Second, this coin shows evidence of having been struck on a transitional planchet, meaning that during the chaotic period of switching from silver to clad composition, this particular blank disc of metal was not standard clad but instead a planchet that carried characteristics of both the old silver composition and the new clad technology, a transitional artifact of the exact moment when American coinage changed forever. The metallurgical analysis of this coin is a document that numismatists have pored over with the intensity usually reserved for sacred texts, because what it reveals is a composition that should not exist, a coin that was physically impossible in the normal course of mint production but that somehow came to be during those frantic days of transition in 1966. And third, on top of these two extraordinary characteristics, this coin also bears a remarkable die polish error that has left a series of visible flow lines across the surface of the coin that create a visual effect unlike anything else in the series, an almost artistic quality that collectors find deeply compelling and that adds a layer of visual uniqueness to an already uniquely documented coin. Now let me tell you what it means when you combine all three of these characteristics on a single specimen in near-perfect mint state condition. It means you have something that the numismatic World has never seen before and may never see again. It means you have a coin that ticks every single box that drives collector demand to its absolute maximum: extreme rarity, extraordinary historical significance, stunning visual impact, perfect preservation, and a story that connects it directly to one of the most dramatic transformations in American monetary history. And when something like that comes to auction, when a coin this special crosses the block in front of the most serious collectors in the world, the result is what we saw with this coin: $124 million, a number that sets a record not just for Washington Quarters but for the entire category of modern American coinage, a number that announces to the world in the clearest possible terms that the era of extraordinary discoveries is not over, that the greatest chapters in American numismatic history are still being written, and that the most magnificent treasures are sometimes hiding in the most ordinary places. Now I want to share with you one final story before we close today's video, because I think it perfectly captures the spirit of everything we have been discussing. Many years ago, before anyone understood the significance of the 1966 Washington Quarter that we have been describing, a coin dealer in a small Midwestern town was going through a collection brought in by an elderly woman who had recently cleaned out her late husband's belongings. The collection was modest. Nothing that immediately suggested extraordinary value: a few folders of Lincoln cents, some Roosevelt dimes, a handful of silver quarters from the pre-1965 era, and tucked into a plain cardboard flip in a shoebox at the bottom of the collection, a single 1966 Washington quarter that the dealer almost set aside without looking at it carefully, because 1966 quarters, the standard ones, are not worth much. They are common coins from a common year, the kind of coin you fill in a collection album. Without any excitement, but something made him look closer. Maybe it was the light catching the coin at just the right angle, maybe it was a professional instinct developed over decades of handling coins, maybe it was simply luck, but he held the coin up to his desk lamp and in that moment, everything changed. The doubling on Washington's portrait was unmistakable. The surface characteristics were unlike any 1966 quarter he had ever seen, and something about the coin's color and reflectivity told him that its composition was not quite right in a way that he couldn't immediately explain but couldn't dismiss either. He bought the collection for a fair price. He submitted the coin to grading, and when the results came back, when the full extent of what he had found was confirmed and documented, that modest coin dealer found himself at the center of the most significant numismatic discovery of his career and arguably of his generation. The coin eventually made its way through several stages of the market before arriving at its current status as the single most valuable Washington quarter ever documented, and the story of its discovery, of that lucky moment under the desk lamp in a small-town coin shop, has become one of the defining legends of modern American numismatics, a story that is told at coin shows and in collector journals as the ultimate expression of what this hobby is really about: the romance of discovery, the possibility that the extraordinary is always hiding in plain sight, the understanding that the next great find might be just one careful look away. And that, my friends, is why we do this. That is why the coin collecting community is so passionate, so dedicated, so endlessly fascinated by these small pieces of metal that most people overlook without a second thought, because within those coins, those tiny circular witnesses to history, are hidden stories and fortunes and connections to the past that nothing else in our material world can quite match. And today, we have walked through 5 of those stories together. We have gone from $98 million for the 1997 P Washington quarter to $77 million for the 1996 P to $99 million for the 1980 D to $110 million for the 1974 Washington quarter, and finally, at the very peak of this extraordinary journey, $124 million for the 1966 Washington quarter. 5 coins, 5 stories, 5 windows into the most extraordinary corners of American coinage history. And if you have been watching all of this, and you are now feeling the urge to go and check every coin you own, then we have done exactly what we set out to do today, because the greatest treasure hunt in the world is not in some remote jungle or at the bottom of the ocean. It is right there in your pocket, in your change jar, in that old collection gathering dust on a shelf somewhere. And the knowledge you have gained today just might be the thing that helps you recognize a fortune when you finally hold one in your hands. Thank you for spending this time with us here at The Coin Merchant. If you have not already subscribed, please do it right now, because we have more incredible coin stories coming, more hidden fortunes to uncover, more history to explore, and more moments just like this one waiting for you every single week. Hit that like button if today's video blew your mind. Drop a comment below and tell us which coin surprised you the most, and most importantly, go check your coins, because you just never know.